Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to another edition of World History AP Vocabulary. Today we are going to be looking at the Gunpowder Empires, and we're going to start with the Ottomans. We're going to talk about the Safavids, and then we are going to finish with the Mughals. So let's start with the Ottomans in this video, and we're going to tell the story, the brief story of the Ottomans in 5 minutes or less using 5 vocabulary words that are kind of important to Ottoman history. So we're going to start with Ottomans, then we're going to talk about Mehmed II, then we'll move on to Janissaries and Vizier, and then finally end with Lepanto, which was a battle in 1571. So this should briefly tell the story of the Ottoman Empire, where they were and how they became powerful. So let's start with just a simple description of the Ottomans. Who were they? So you'll hear them as the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks were a Turkic-speaking group of people who basically filled the power void in the Middle East that was left by the Mongol rule. So if you recall back to previous units, the Seljuk Turks were in the area of what was called the Holy Land during the Crusades with the Christians. And the Seljuk Turks were fairly strong for a short period of time. But by the end of basically the 1300s, mid-1300s, around 1350, the Ottomans, which were a group of Turkic peoples in the area, solidified power in the region around Anatolia or Asia Minor. So this is the Middle East that touches the Mediterranean Sea, basically. Mehmed II is the name of an Ottoman leader who essentially was, he was given the nickname the Conqueror because he was the Ottoman who was able to conquer, essentially beat the Byzantines. So the Byzantine Empire, which had been thriving since the 500s really, up until 1453, is when Mehmed II was able to conquer Constantinople. This is signaled basically the death of the Byzantine Empire and the legitimate growth of the Ottoman Empire, who took basically control of all that land in the Eastern Mediterranean that used to be a part of the Byzantine Empire. So, and that's where they started to control and influence. Now, the Ottomans ruled with basically military leaders as their political leaders. They were Muslims, they were Sunni Muslims in the region, and were fairly religiously tolerant. But the most powerful people in the region were warriors, and so the warriors that became more powerful were the Janissaries. So the Janissaries was the name given to infantry, which are soldiers essentially, who gained political power over time. So most of these infantry men were recruited as young boys. This was they were part of the Devshirme, which was when the Ottomans would recruit young boys into the military, provide them with education, provide them with military training, and convert them to Islam. And so they became a very powerful fighting force. And because they relied on military power, one of the reasons they're called the Gunpowder Empire, this fighting group became very powerful politically as well. So that's the Janissaries, and the Janissaries would eventually become extremely powerful politically. The Vizier, or is a word which basically was what the Abbasids used to use, wazir, as their political advisor, the head political advisor. So the Grand Vizier would be essentially the consultant, the head consultant to the Sultan. The Sultan was the Ottoman leader who had the most power, but as the sultans became more and more kind of obsessed with court life and personal pleasantries, the Viziers became, the Grand Viziers became the most powerful people in the emperor. So this position of Grand Vizier and Vizier in general was an extremely powerful position within the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire thrived for quite a while. They were involved in sea trade not only on the Mediterranean but in the Indian Ocean, and were one of the most powerful groups in the Middle East because of their wonderful placement at the end of the Silk Road and at the verge of multiple seas. And so their military power made them an extremely strong empire at the time. But this battle that we're going to mention, the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, signaled kind of the end of Ottoman dominance in the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm sorry. And the Battle of Lepanto was in 1571, and it featured the Ottoman fleet against essentially a combined force of Italian and Spanish ships. If you remember, around the late 1500s, the Spanish were already kind of found or discovered the New World, and so their legitimacy on the seas was at threat from the Ottomans, and so they helped the Venetians, these Italians, defeat the Ottoman Empire at this Battle of Lepanto, and it kind of pushed the Ottomans out of the Mediterranean, and so they focused their trading and seafaring in the Indian Ocean, which they were also losing power in the Indian Ocean to the Portuguese, who had established contacts in the Indian Ocean. So this battle kind of is one particular battle, but it kind of signals the end of Ottoman dominance in the region at the expense of the growing European dominance. So there it is. It took me 6 minutes to do this instead of 5. I lied to you a little bit, but hey, nobody's perfect. But be awesome.